follow-up question on that. Who is your, this kind of follows up on Carla's question, who is your community, and who makes decisions about what gets done next?
The community is going to drive it. I mean, essentially the people who are the collections that we are helping are the people that are going to tell us what they require and what they need next.
Is that just via the forum, the specified forum, or?
Via the forum and amongst each other, and in communication with their own IT folks and with our IT folks, and you know, there's no formal structure in place for people to say this is what we want you to include next, or this is what we want you to include. But we are hoping that, you know, once this whole thing gets established, that we will have those, you know, avenues of communication open for people to let us know which direction it is that they need us to go in terms of, you know, beefing up certain parts of the thing to make it work for them. Yeah. Well, let's start down here.
Well, I just had I'm just kind of curious about the services you provide.
Mm-hmm.
Could you give sort of an estimate of how much time that maybe you spend on sort of DBA sort of issues, and then other you also mentioned you also spend time helping collections with their customized reports or labels, things that are, you know, really collection specific. I mean, these are all kind of collection specific.
Yeah,
but they probably require different sets of skills that you presumably have in house.
The only information that I can really give you is information that's pertinent to Specify 5, because we haven't done any of these 6 conversions yet. In Specify 5, it was literally a case of Glenn would block off a week's time for each individual database, and he would do everything for them. He would do the data manipulation, the data massaging to get it into Specify. He would do their forms, he would do their reports, and he would ship it back to them. And that would take a week, independent of the size of the collection. Okay. Now, what we're looking at for 6 is, because we're anticipating this increased demand, is that we're going to have a whole bunch of students who are going to be doing the form customization and the report creation, and Glenn will be tasked with just doing the data massaging. So essentially, he will massage the data into 6, and then he will hand that off to a bank of students who will then manipulate all your forms for you, they'll do all your reports for you, and then the whole thing will be shipped back to you. And that process shouldn't take more than a week, as it did in 5. But we have no data to go on because we haven't tried it yet. We also have a converter which converts a 5 database to a 6 database, which isn't pertinent to anybody here. But there's a whole bunch of things. You know, you're going from a really complex data model to another really complex data model that is completely different. And so there's a whole bunch of machinations that need to be done in between that. And so we've built a converter that will take the 5 data and take it across to 6. And in most cases, it should just be hitting a button, and it'll take it and map it up and stick it in. But there's, you know, Glenn's manipulated tables and fields for people in the past to do all sorts of funky things. And so those will have to be manipulated by him. But the sort of thing that we're looking at is no more than 2 weeks.
And the prioritization, how are those decisions made, if there are any hard decisions?
That's the discussion that we're having at the moment. You know, we obviously have a whole bunch of existing users in 5. We have a whole bunch of new users who are wanting to come into 6. How do we prioritize those people against each other? We can't say, you know, well, all you new users are going to have to wait until we have all the 5 people in. We're going to have to come up with some sort of scheme that keeps everybody happy, if it's at all possible. But you know, I would think that they will come up with some sort of system of trying to intersperse new collections with old collections and trying to get them in. We're hoping that, you know, as I said, the process is going to self-regulate itself based on the fact that some of these collections are waiting around for certain things to be incorporated, like batch editing, series processing, web, digger, all of that sort of stuff. So some of the stuff to a degree will self-regulate itself in terms of those people will all wait until summer or later to go into 6 because they have to have web access, and then we can deal with all of the other people in between them. And you know, we're just going to try and come up with some sort of system that keeps everybody happy. But you know, given the demand, there's going to be some sort of lag period, you know, depending on where you are in the queue. And that's another thing that we're toying with at the moment, is how do we actually present a system to the user of, okay, I want to get myself in the queue. You know, I'm ready to go. How do I get myself in the queue, and how long am I going to wait? And coming up with some sort of calendar system on the web so that people can see exactly where they are and when they're due next, and etc. So that's what we're grappling with at the moment. We just all took a collective deep breath after we actually got this thing out the door, and now we're starting to have those discussions as to what do we do next.
Let's take, we've got 5 more minutes in the meeting, the proper meeting here. We do actually have another.
It's not 425 though.
Right, 2:25. We have another half an hour or so for those who want to stick around and ask some questions. So let's have just a couple more questions.
That
that
hand, that hand at the back has been up there a long time.
So I just want to ask, sort of building on some of these questions about prioritization, can you say some more about the longer term financial or business model? It sounds like you guys are at a point where, based on a lot of new and good work at SIX, that you expect the community to be even larger. It sounds like you're funded primarily from grant funds.
We're funded solely by NSF.
Okay. And it also sounds like from a number of things you said through the presentation that you guys are offering a set of services to people who want to join Specify or be part of it in terms of the work you do. How do you imagine paying for this for the long-term future? Are you going to are the 100 or so institutions all going to pay a small fee, or what are some of the thoughts on that?
Well, the model at the moment is that there's going to be no fee structure. That nothing that we provide is going to be paid for. If anything, there may be a small fee for conversions or form creation or anything like that, but that's not even on the table at the moment.
So where will Kansas come up with funding to support
Okay,
this
well, nothing's ever a guarantee, but what we are hoping is that NSF is going to see this new product and is going to see all these new people coming on board and is going to see how important this product is to the community, that they are going to continue to fund us. Our grant cycle runs out in January. We have enough money to keep everybody going until January, and then Jim is going to write the new grant proposal to NSF to try and extend that funding for another 4 years, which is the maximum you can apply for from NSF. And so, you know, nothing's ever a guarantee, but we've been funded consistently since 1987. We have 230 odd collections in there, and it's going to grow exponentially as soon as people start going into SIX. You know, I would think that NSF is going to find it very, very hard to just drop this thing like a hot potato. And so, but there are also other avenues that we are looking at. Obviously, our NSF funding mandates that we have to support US. We can't support international people. But we have a whole bunch of international people in 5 at the moment, who again, we cannot just drop like a hot potato. And so we are going to have to find some mechanism of continuing to support those international collections. And one of the mechanisms that Jim is looking at is going to a foundation or a couple of foundations to try and get some ancillary funds to be able to support those international people. And also coming up with similar collaborations with international people. We have a person in South Africa who's very interested in doing conversions and forms and reports for all of the African collections. We have a similar guy in Colombia who's interested in doing it for all of the South American collections. And so if we can come up with these collaborative arrangements where we have somebody who has the knowledge skills to be able to do these conversions and forms and reports and stuff, you know, we can start branching out into letting the community look after itself.
So there's not you're not considering right now a possibility of building some kind of more formal community structure where people would both make a contribution but also have more of a formal say in what the priorities were as well too. Right now it sounds like most of it is, let's continue to secure grant money, let's have Kansas sort of be at the hub here in terms of driving the prioritization and the service delivery.
Well, we don't want to drive the prioritization. We want the community to drive the prioritization. You know, essentially we're starting to branch out into that area of letting the community dictate the direction that this thing is going to follow. Both through them creating third-party applications, but also them letting us know what it is that they want this thing to include. You know, we obviously have limited programming capabilities in terms of how many people we can hire. And the more people we can bring on board in terms of third-party people who would be interested in working with us, the more we can broaden the scope and make sure that these third-party applications are being generated at the same time. And so I think there is a dynamic shift in the sort of thinking. You know, I'm not privy to the way Jim's mind works or the way that he's thinking in the future. But from the limited discussions that we have had, I get the impression that there is a definite dynamic shift in terms of, you know, realizing that, hey, this NSF nest egg is gonna you know, run dry eventually. We need to start looking at other avenues of supporting this project and making sure that it continues. And one of those is going to foundations to try and support the international people, and the other one is trying to come up with this community of people that will drive it forward on their own. Now that it's open source, we can have, you know, all sorts of people collaborating to the source and making sure that it goes in the direction that they want it to go.